Hello,
Hello.
hello.
Hey.
What's up, Stephen? How you doing?
I'm all right, mate. I'm all right. How are you doing? You okay?
All good, man. All good. Nice to see everyone. Hello, hello. We'll let everyone pile in. First one
Hey
of the year.
guys.
Hey,
What's up,
Faisal.
Faisal?
Hey, how's it going?
You guys would. Hey, I'm all right. You guys would be impressed with me. I was looking at something on the back end of my website, which will auto-generate um, the social sharing images for every page, and add all the text titles of each page. So I feel ready for this conversation. You know, getting up my no scripting skills.
Awesome.
I'm feeling a little bit yeah, I'm feeling a little bit nostalgic right now because this is the first time I've come back to doing the podcast on the app because now it
Ooh.
records because I've always been doing it with Club Deck to record it. So face, and I hope it is recording because otherwise I have to jump. But
Yeah, I think it is.
is my connection okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're good. Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right, guys. Looks like we got a few people in, so I think we're good to get started. Um, I think it's kind of perfect timing for this one. Welcome to Archi-Tech Network number 33. Tips on how to land your dream job. And we've got with us today a guest who doesn't really need much of an introduction on Clubhouse because I'm sure many of the people have been in your rooms and already know a bit about yourself. But we've got Stephen Drew from the Architecture Social. He's the founder and managing director of the Architecture Social. You're also a newly or fairly newly minted council member of the RIBA, which is super cool. And you are the head of talent at Ackroyd Lowry. I hope I've said that right. So yeah, I mean, you've looking from your CV or your LinkedIn page, sorry, you've spent a good few years in recruitment, but you kind of had that architecture background. You went through that pretty architecture background of your part one and your part two, and then you spent some time in practice. Time to talk about this. Just general tips and tricks on how to land that dream job. Of course, we'll touch base on some of the techie stuff, but I think it can be a fairly open-ended conversation or a fairly general conversation. But yeah, I don't know if you maybe want to kick things off and talk about a little bit about how you made that transition from architecture to then go to the recruitment side. Was it kind of the business side of things and how that came about?
Sure. I think you were being very nice there, Ollie. It's like, how did I go from architecture to the dark side to being, Wolf of Wall Street, city
Wolf of
wanker or whatever in recruitment? Well, I've always enjoyed architecture, and I've been thinking a lot about this because we all have certain skills that we forget we have. And it's really, really important, especially in the process of looking for a job in architecture, to remind ourselves that we do have those skills, because I'm sure we all remember that at some point, whether it's our first, if you're a graduate, you're building up to your interviews, you're probably thinking like, oh gosh, well, what do I even do in an interview? And probably if you're an experienced professional, then you've had your first interviews and you still have interviews, and it's always a bit of an ordeal. It's like decrypting what is an interview. How do I do it? How do I function as a person in an interview? And actually, what's bizarrely awesome about architecture is that we've done incredibly difficult presentations. We've done incredibly difficult interviews, and we don't even know that they're interviews. And that's presentations and crits. Crits is effectively an interview. However, if you don't think about it like you're presenting a project, when you're actually looking for a job, you're presenting yourself. You're the prospect. You're the project. you're basically pitching to the company owner, that you can add a positive influence on their business. And that's what it comes down to, really, is when you're looking for a job, you're trying to get a job. Basically, you're trying to add value to someone's business. So if they got a business need on, then they're interviewing for a role. Yeah. So how do you win that role? You've got to convince that person that you're the best possible outcome to solving that problem in their business. And to do that, you have to tick all the boxes logically. But where it gets really interesting is that people make decisions emotionally, right? Okay. So what do I mean by that? So I'm sure we've all seen crits, yeah, where there's a person's there and the project's good, and they're ticking all the boxes. They've got the plans, the sections, and you think, yeah, good projects. But what happens is you kind of switch off. I mean, I've done it so many times. I have the shortest attention span in the world, and you just end up looking at your phone or whatever. And I look back and I think, why was that? And it's usually because the delivery of that project, yeah, it wasn't that interesting. It wasn't conveyed with emotion. There was no eye contact. The person was presenting the project reading from a fucking piece of paper. Now what does that do? If the person's looking down at a piece of paper and is kind of talking, mumbling that their project is a beautiful scheme where you looked at all, you lose interest. You lose total interest. And that's what's really fascinating about interviews, about jobs, about CVs and portfolios, is that you logically got to tick the box, but you've got to get that emotional connection. So there's a few ways that we can talk about that today. And I think it's really, really important that there's a few different vehicles to get a job, isn't there? So first is the email, making contact. So if you haven't met the owner in person, say no, you're not having champagne and gin glasses and you were in a social event and you happen to bump into someone, then you're probably going to send an email to the company. So that email has got to logically explain who you are, what you're about, who, what, where, when, why. But then you've got to have a little bit of emotion in there. And what do I mean by that? Not a long email, it's got to convey the right thing. It's got to show a bit of passion. It's got to show a bit of interest. It's got to connect with the reader. So how do you do that? Whether you say, look, so I'm going to make this up on the spot. So part time I do a little bit of recruitment at Great Larry. So let's see if I'm in the inbox, the kind of an email that's going to attract my attention is from someone that straight away in the inbox in the email says, application architectural assistant part 2 with Revit, available immediately. Okay, that's logically going to say about it, and I go, okay, click. So that's tick the box. How do you emotionally get there? So it would be like, dear Stephen, I'm a part 2 architectural assistant that has been following Larry Architect's work for many years. I've recently seen one of the talks on YouTube about VR. I'm passionate about VR and sustainability as an issue. Okay, so I'm a part 2 is available immediately in the central London area. I would love to meet you in person to talk about my projects, my portfolio and CV. And as well as that, we can talk about anything you want, including my passion for VR. Are you interested? Are you available to meet with me next week? So I made that up on the spot, but you get the gist. That you need that in an email. And if it's any longer, I'm bored, right? If it's any shorter, oh well, good for you. You've done better than me. But you need to get that point, because first is the email, then you got to attach the CV. Yeah, you got to attach that portfolio, and we can go into that now. I'm more than happy to go into that as well.
Yeah, maybe I think a good. I think it would be. It's an interesting question because I think it's. From what I understand, it's like a bit of a hot market right now for the employees to be looking for new jobs.
Yep.
So maybe it'd be good to touch on that. And then I thought between us, we can kind of aim this towards graduates, your part one, part twos, because I think as you get more senior, um, the process gets a little easier because you have connections, maybe start to develop a name in the industry and et cetera, et cetera. So we'll gear it towards fresh graduates and recent graduates, part one, part twos, because I remember that like when I graduated, and I graduated in the worst, one of the worst times possible. I did my part one, I graduated nine, and I remember the dean of the school was kind of the speech that she gave was kind of like, yeah, good luck, guys. Like, try and find a job off the back of like the greatest financial in 2012, which wasn't as bad, but it was the second. It was like what they called the double dip, right, of the recession, which was about 2000, closer to 2011, but it was still not a great time to be an architect either one. And it's just you got that list of like a hundred people that you're just firing out emails to. But now I think from your perspective as a recruiter, and whilst I haven't been involved inside the office with the recruitment before, it's something I have been getting into in the last few months, and it's kind of been interesting to see on that side as well. Um, Maybe to kick off a little bit, what's your vibe of now in the like job space? Of course, if people don't know that's tuning in, myself as a case, I think most of this will be kind of UK centric, but I think it still reflects what I'm hearing in the US and other places in Europe and things like that. So it's time to be looking for a job right now.
Yeah, yeah, it is a hard time, but like everything else, right? I mean, unless you articulate basic things, you're still not going to get a job. But then also, if you do have the core skill sets, like you said, Ollie, you can build upon that, And so there's definitely certain techniques that I do think help people stand out. So I was talking a bit about the email, but especially in CVs and portfolios, the first thing that you're probably, as a hiring manager, Ollie, is you're going to open up that CV, right? And let's talk with a tech angle because this is the Archi-Tech Network, right? So
Of course.
yeah, we're gonna get the CV through. Now, I would love your thoughts on this as well, but it's always interesting, I find, when people describe software. Okay, so I'm sure you've seen the wheels. I call them the wheels of misfortune because people go, yeah, I'm 80% in Revit, and that's kind of
Yeah,
like that's a really interesting one to decrypt because I mean, there's no length of time there, but even then, I think length of time is better than 4 out of 5. But as you know, it's like someone can use Revit for 10 years and do the same fucking year for 10 years, right? And they'd be a basic user, or they can be advanced. And then, like, I remember I met a part two who then I got him a job as a BIM coordinator. And I said, "How good are you at Revit?" And he was like, "I'm okay." Right. But then I've spoken to people who are like part twos and architects, and I go, "How good are you Revit?" And they're like, "I'm the best." I go, "Wow!" And then they'll do like a test and get like
Revit
40%. I
Zen.
was like, "Yeah, what happened to being the best?" So actually, I think that the best people are incredibly modest and probably too modest, but it's
Yeah,
really really and hard to it's hard to unravel that in the CV. So I guess where I was going with
yeah,
this convo, and I want to get your thoughts on it, it's not just the software listed, is it? It's the kind of the examples of what the person's used. So I see like case studies or, talking about their roles and responsibilities. And normally then when you get someone in an interview and you ask them those questions, if they've actually had a problem, they can tell you the nitty gritty of how they got there, how they solved it. Whereas someone who really hasn't used the software or hasn't done much, when you go into detail, they can't give you a straight answer.
yeah. I mean, we could open a can of worms on the whole rating your software skills. Yeah, I mean, the process of hiring specialists. So that when I say I was involved in hiring, it was of specialists, not so much general, like a designer or that. Although I'm starting to see more CVs come across my desk for that kind of stuff. But yeah, especially, take those with a pinch of salt. That I've never seen anyone that's below like a 5 out of 10 for any software, which would put you at intermediate, right? If you're in the middle, you'd be at like, but and I have actually tried to solve that at all, but I did a video on the Archi-Tech software that I recommended you should learn, and just of the Archi-Tech software right now in 2021, 22. And in order to kind of try and get across at what level I thought you should be, I thought of a way to simplify this to simply basic, intermediate, advanced, and expert. Four very simple categories. And I was kind of used it on one project, or you've been using it for less than 1 year and you haven't used it in practice, then you are basic, and etc. etc. I won't go into it, but that was the only way I could really start to condense it down a bit. But I think you're right. To be honest, what the scale is you use to build or visualization, it's great to put it on the CV, but you then have to back it up in the portfolio. And I think that's what you were kind of getting at, is it's really, you can put whatever you want in the in the CV, but it doesn't really mean anything unless you back it up in the portfolio.
Correct. And I think it's when you say you do software, you have to link it with case examples of when you've used it, because then that's going to be useful to you, isn't it? And because then you can disseminate if the person knows it. And you're right. How that's articulated in the portfolio, I think, is extremely important. And whether it's not even just tech, I think that actually in CVs, you got to think about them actually serving a purpose. So they need to be functional and efficient to get the information across and get rid of the faff. So I always find that there's an awful lot of faff on the CVs. Where you can, when you go into an interview, you can talk about your passions, you can talk about all this stuff, but I always try to beware of meandering off course. So what do I mean by that? Have you ever seen, if you read a CV or you look at your own, be really critical and hold up the ugly mirror on the about me section, because I always tend to find is that they go off on a tangent. So you don't want to be the person that says, look, I am an architectural assistant and I'm super 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 interested in prefabrication, especially when it comes to sustainability. I was inspired by the Cedric Price's Fun Palace many, many years ago. And ever since then, I've decided that I want to pursue architecture. Oh my God. It's like, well, that's relevant, but how does that, that's not relevant to my business, and that's nice, but that doesn't apply. So what would be a better version of an about me at the start of a CV? It's, I am an architectural assistant who's available immediately in the central London area, with 2 years experience in industry using Revit on residential and commercial schemes. I am passionate about VR, augmented reality, and please ask me about this in an interview, right? So it's just a little bit of curiosity, and I think that's another thing as well, is that we always in these CVs and portfolios, especially when we're sending portfolios, is that I tend to think that people just like absolutely blow their loads. I mean, I don't know if Ollie, you've had this, but no one wants to see 100-page portfolio in an email. It should be a taster. It should be 10 to 15 pages, and that's designed to compel the reader to invite the person, the candidate, you who's applying to the interview, so that you can then see the 50 pages in person. You've always got to hold a little bit back, and at the same time, in the portfolio you send, no one wants to see 10 plans or 10 sections. They want a plan, a section. When you're showing your work, you always would put your most recent project first, right? But you want to, in that page with your first project, maybe you would have that killer image with a technical drawing, with a plan, with a section and a nice little description, but very little because people don't really read them huge amount. And in the description, say what Reba stages or whatever stages of the projects you worked on, say what software you use, but that's really going to be more useful than, 11 details of the same scale. That's not going to be really applicable.
Yeah. So, I mean, to summarize a little bit about we're talking really about the core part of a job submission, which is for an architect to. I've always applied using three things: the cover letter, CV, and portfolio. And of course, the CV and portfolio can be combined. Like the first page of your portfolio is usually your CV. Some places make you submit it separately, but would you that's the core three elements for every application. Would you agree?
You're not wrong. I personally think that I'm not precious about the covering letter, which is controversial. I would rather
Yeah.
someone. Yeah, yeah, because I know some people like it. See a lot of people worry about the covering letter. Ironically, I say this, but in all the jobs where I've applied for in the past, Ollie, up until I was like 22, 23, I would always do a covering letter. So
Yeah.
I'm contradicting what I've done myself. However, I think that as when I'm a hiring manager, I read the email and that tells me the story, and then it's actually the CV and portfolio I really care about, and the CV is kind of the real
Well,
backbone.
I
It's like
guess
the skeleton.
for that in that case, the email is the cover letter in a way. So
Correct.
right,
Correct.
right. So for example, in a big, for example, you know, if I'm putting out an advert for a BIM specialist or computational specialist, the emails
Yeah.
don't come to me, right? They go into a system. And so what
Uh,
we see this other side of the system where you just get, names and cover letters, uh, portfolio. You get the links that people upload
I
and all
got
the
you.
information they put in. That's why for me going through that process, the cover letter I think is the most personal part. Where I think in there I would always recommend first of all like put the actual position, location, and name of the firm. Of course, I've been there as well. You're obviously going to use this cover letter and portfolio for many other roles, especially as a junior fresh graduate, right? We're not idiots. Everyone, you're obviously applying to many firms, but at least one, make sure you haven't left in another firm's name or like put the wrong job
Correct.
title. Like for example, um, in the office, I think a part one position is called a junior designer. It's not called an architecture assistant part one. So put, hey, I'm applying for a junior designer role at big office in London, and put like you're clearly applying for this role, like in there. And generally, like for me, the cover letter is, obviously you write a quite generic about yourself and your skills, but I would always have a one paragraph that is where you plug in, you write a specific paragraph about that particular firm and try and connect with, something within their company. Um, and I think that's for me where you make that personal connection, whether it's an email or a cover letter and that kind of stuff. And for me, when I both times I graduated, the times I got interviews was, often with the firms that I quite liked. Like for example, after my masters, I applied to a company called Facet Homes, and I featured them in my dissertation. And so, like, I obviously had this great connection. I understood them, and like that came through in my cover letter because I was like chatting about, the way they build homes and stuff. And I think that, and even if it's just a couple lines, making that connection to the firm is a big thing that you at least understand, um, you know, about, right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think that's a good way of looking at it. So in my head, if you're sending an email, yeah, you're right. That's an interesting thought. It's kind of like that little bit of the covering letter. But what I like in your scenario is if you're limited by the system, then you put that introduction into a more
Mm,
traditional covering
right.
letter.
Right,
Yeah,
because some firms you just, is send your CV to, HR at architecturefirm.com. Other ones you go through this, and they're all usually quite annoying, like systems where you load your CV up, you load your portfolio, and it's always like some ridiculous 4 megabyte limit or something, which is super annoying.
yeah,
Fill in
yeah.
all the, you know, I think if it's a system, you obviously know there's a bigger process to it. If it's just an email, you're probably going to be sending it to someone that will directly read it, and therefore the email is critical.
Yeah, yeah. I tell you what's interesting though, it's that, and you're not wrong. You're talking about how the best way to deal with the system. And in a big company, you've got this system there. However, it's really interesting, us as humans, we kind of do these patterns which we've been trained, right? So when you think about applying to a company, people go, the first thing I find always fascinating is that people will go on a website, and if there's no job, sometimes they just don't apply, right? Or the other thing is just to look at job boards and not look at companies. So, especially if you're a graduate, I think you should always apply speculatively to the companies that you like at the start. Your dream company. Send your beautiful tailor-made application where you write that covering letter saying, "I really want to work at Zaha Hadid ever since yada yada yada." Fine, and then you kind of got the next tier down from your dream roles, in my opinion, where you you tailor it a bit, but you have a core structure there. And a general rule which I think
Right.
is that I use, Ollie, which could be good, is that um, and I use it in my job, is that I only customize a top part of a
Yeah.
script. So in this case, a covering letter, it was a script that you've got or a template. You just know that in your head there's one line at the top which you customize, and that stops the problem psychologically of missing out the fact that you put
Yeah.
Zaha Hadid Architects at the bottom, and then you send that to SOM, and you look like a mug.
Yeah. 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 Exactly. That's exactly what I used to do. And whether it's like a couple lines or one paragraph, it's a template, but you're just finding that balance between the general and the because again, as I'm going to be applying to quite a lot of places, whereas as you get a little bit more experience, that is maybe going from a firm, so then you can put a bit more effort into the 10, cover letters and that kind of stuff. Um, Email and cover letter connection. Just to kind of sum up the portfolio CV. I mean, I almost, you, of course, your CV and portfolio is incredibly important, but it's almost like that's you need a good portfolio and CV to get into the conversation. But and then we can maybe discuss other things that I think are super useful.
Let me ask you a question, which is interesting, right? Because you're a hiring manager now, and say now you've got this digital role, and HR says you've got to use the system. But don't worry, this is our secret, so HR isn't listening, right? Say now an amazing junior digital specialist
Yeah,
finds your email. Okay, they don't send it to info. They send it direct, and they go, "Dear Ollie, I've been following your YouTube channel for
yeah,
quite
yeah,
some time, and it inspired me. Here is my CV, cover letter, and portfolio. I would love to hear from you. I'm available in your area next week. Is there a chance we can meet up?" Now, I bet you, you would even though you've got the system and everything there, you wouldn't say, whoa, 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 first things first, never email me direct. You probably would read it. It would go straight to your inbox. You'd go, this person's amazing. And you probably would just put them on the system anyways. Is that
Yeah,
accurate?
yeah. So this happens a bunch of times. People reach out and
Right?
like want to play. So people do that on LinkedIn. I'll always talk to people, and what I'll say is, yeah, of course, if they send something, but I would, and we can set up a talk or something like that. But I would always say, make sure you also apply through the website, because then when I go to the HR crew and say like, hey, actually someone came up
Yeah.
who might be great for this role, they will be like, oh, what's their name? And they will just pick them out of the system. So it's kind of, I always say, obviously it still works, and for specialist stuff, it's a bit more easy because if there's an advert in London for a BIM specialist or computational specialist, it's probably me that's going to be looking at the CVs. Whereas if you're applying as a designer, there's a whole, there's like 5 or 6 people in the office that hiring committee, and they all look at it together. So it's a bit of a different story. But yeah, for sure, you're still gonna make something happen, but you
Wow.
still need them to be in the system to to proceed our side, if you see what I mean. I
Correct.
into it. I'm sure I could. I've never done it before,
I reckon you could, because you're the hiring manager. And that's
but
the interesting thing, right? So you're being respectful to HR, but the point is, you saw, oh my, you write to that person, you go, look, looks great. I'd love to meet you, but do me a favor, send it to here and it'll get filtered through. Right. The point is, though, it's really scary to speak to the person that's going to be the hiring manager. So we as people, we all tend to go, oh, no, we couldn't do that. We
yeah,
don't want to bother Ollie because he's busy. I will send it to info at inbox.com. Now, your company's got this nice system that's set up because they're a big company, yada, yada, yada. Now, I've managed loads of companies' inboxes. I've managed one now. And when I joined, the first thing I see is a pile of shitty emails from everyone saying, hey, gas. Hey, can we talk about your water, about your rates? And then you get recruitment consultants like me
yeah,
and just pestering you and stuff. So this inbox is full of shit usually. And the danger is you can get lost in there, right? So I say, as long as you've tailored that CV and portfolio and you're being respectful, and that's the key word, respectful, not entitled. You're being respectful and you're saying, here's my CV just in case. If it's relevant, let me know. Actually, if you feel a little bit ballsy and you say, send it to either the company owner or director, then or the hiring manager. So, for instance, if it's a BIM role, Ollie, you're going to be the best person to speak to in my head because that's your area. You're the best person in the business to advise that. Then chances are you're going to get a much clearer decision. Doesn't mean you're going to get the job, but you'll get a
yeah,
decision quicker. And that's the thing. And to summarize this point before we open it up is what I would say is if you're ever looking for a company, rather than send it to the inbox, the info at, which I call like basically Pandora's box of rubbish, don't put your CV there. Try and see, go on the website, look who the company owners is, and half the
yeah,
time in the profile you'll have their email there and send it to them, dear
yeah,
Tom,
yeah, yeah,
and that's much more likely to get you an answer one way or another.
yeah. So now we're getting into like, at this point you've got, the CV's got to be clean, graphically nice, graphical language throughout the
Yeah.
CV portfolio. You've written a good cover letter, email. That's the core thing in applying for your job. Now, the stuff I would recommend to up your chances of connecting with someone. And like you saying, just a little bit of research. It's not that hard to find, some people in the company that you're trying to hire from, whether it's a design role or a specialist role, or people reach out and say, hey, look, I'm really interested in applying. Um, can you give me some advice on this on the CV or thingy? And if it's okay, if it's a good portfolio, it seems like a good candidate, I will always, and that's really all I can do. I think it's a good connection. Look at it and they'll pull the name out and you'll know at least there's someone that's looked at it. So I think, yeah, especially with LinkedIn these days, it's so easy to just find a little bit about the firm that you're hiring, so and who you're most likely to kind of may be working with or possibly interview and that kind of stuff. So yeah, I think a little bit of LinkedIn research these days, I think goes a long way, right?
Absolutely. All the information's there. It's never been easier. There's no reason that you ever need to anymore write "Dear Sir" or "Madam" in the start of an email. And that's a bit of a turn off anyways, isn't it? When you ever read a CV, you go, "Oh, dear Sir, Madam." It's like, if in doubt, put the company owner's name, rather than "Dear Sir" or
Yeah.
"Madam." But
Again,
personalization.
that's a tricky one depending on the size, right? If it's a smaller firm, I think that's right. But if it's a big one, it would be almost comical if you put, you're applying to Foster's and you're like,
Dear Rem.
dear Norman.
Yeah. Norman, Norman, let me in.
Norman,
Well,
how's it
I
going,
think,
dude?
yeah, I think you can normally kind of boil it down slightly. Okay,
Yeah,
Foster's is a
exactly,
really good
exactly.
example because the London office is like 400 people. But
Right.
I would just try and make it personal, or even get like the HR manager's name or someone,
Yeah, yeah,
something,
yeah.
something, right? So that you're not completely like, super anonymous. And the other thing, the obvious things that I should mention really, really quickly is, don't CC a bunch of companies in. That's awful.
What
Don't.
do you mean by that? Do one
If you're gonna,
application and you just apply to all of them the same email?
no, never do that. Yeah, that's what I
Yeah.
mean. Not to do.
Oh, really?
It's like,
I wouldn't
maybe
have
I did.
even thought to advise anyone not to do
I
that.
got a friend once that did it for a mailing list, and he
Oh
accidentally
no.
mailed his own company where he was because he used his old list before he got the job, and they got his CV and application, and they fired him because he applied to
Oh,
his own job.
oh
But
my.
yeah. Yeah, yes, but when you got a big list, you don't think about these things, and
That's
it's not
almost
the way
that's
to
almost
go.
natural selection. That's that's best.
Darwinism at its finest.
Okay, yeah. I didn't even think to advise that, but yeah, good. Don't don't apply to your own job.
I know, I know. I think get
Well,
organized and keep an Excel list of who you apply
yeah.
to, but just go down that process. Don't be tempted to shortcut and
It's
email everyone. You know,
it's an odd one as well because obviously we all know, especially if you're a fresh graduate, you're obviously not just applying to this architecture firm. We all know you're going to be applying. I guess it's like dating, right? You all know you're on online dating or something. This person is clearly going to be dating other
exactly,
people, but I don't want to
exact,
know about it, right?
exactly. I mean, yeah, you
I'd
hit the
rather
nail
be
on the head.
naive.
Yeah, if you meet someone on Tinder, you know they've messaged other people, but you don't
Yeah,
expect them to bring it up on the date. You
yeah,
know?
yeah, yeah. I've applied to here and this guy and this guy.
Yeah, that's a
It's
turn off. You want to feel like you're the only one on the date, even though deep down you know it's a
yeah,
lie. But
yeah.
you want to feel it, right?
But
And
then it's
that's the job thing.
yeah. So yeah, that's a good one. The other point I wanted to touch on was, this is getting into some of my top tips, is kind of what you said, that just because there isn't a job advert right now doesn't mean that there isn't higher, like a position available. And I think, especially, for bigger firms, um, the business model of architecture is incredibly simple. You get more projects, you need more people, right? If projects stop, and they may have to downsize the people, but it's a simple philosophy. The more projects they get, the more people they need. So whenever you see a big firm, on Dazine or Arctalian, they've landed like a massive competition, or you see something about, so and so was assigned was picked for this project. I would CV off around that time for them to like, okay, let's get a job application, an advert out there, and so you have to get someone to fill it out, and then HR sends it out to various websites and stuff. So that would be my top tip is like you can be a bit proactive. Like if a company has landed a big project, they're probably going to hire us soon, and you can kind of get ahead of that a little bit and maybe reach out to someone on LinkedIn or something like that. So that's one. I would just kind of one little tip from my perspective on that kind of prospective application.
Correct. Yeah. And to add to that, especially in your world, so saying now, hypothetically, you're an architect, but then you've decided that you want to go down the digital route, then I would imagine that getting involved with stuff like, so you used to have in the UK, I don't know whether it's there now, but the UK BIM crew, the BIM Alliance, and then you'd have like
Yeah,
people in Grasshopper
yeah,
passionate about parametrics meet up once a month. Now, getting involved stuff like that is a really good way to get noticed, because say now you're hiring and you're in that you go to this event every month, Farley, and some bright adventure keen enthusiastic kid comes along with some super scripts. You take notice, right? And then
yeah,
maybe it doesn't come up now, but then if you have a problem in the office and you're like, oh my god, I need the scripting kid, like what's that guy's name in the Grasshopper meeting, and then you frantically look,
yeah,
and that's how you kind of get job opportunities. And that's the thing, is that when you're starting, all this stuff that we're talking about of writing a cover letter, writing a CV and portfolio is super, super important. But over time, the more and more you build up your network, and the more and more you build your presence, the more and more you get involved with stuff, you don't need to do that stuff anymore, because you build a reputation for yourself. And
yeah,
the thing is, um, people listening here, you maybe thinking like, oh my god, I don't. That's easy for you to say, Steve, but I've got to. I don't feel like I know people, and you're like, okay, well then you're going to do the basic things, but you don't forget that you can make more and more connections quicker by going to these events. So if you're sitting on your ass at home and you're not going to these networking events, like the fact of being like on Clubhouse has been a good example of getting involved and getting to know people. Because I never knew you before Clubhouse, Ollie or Faisal, and that's fine, because
yeah,
that's what it's all about. And you start making these connections, but then if you're passionate about BIM, for example, if you're going to these events and you make those connections, opportunities come to you. Sometimes
yeah,
people who are hiring go like, oh, look, I mean, do you happen to know anyone that's looking? And you'd be like, well, actually, I'm thinking of going into this kind of career. And they go, okay, you should send me your CV. And then that way, you don't even need to do the whole thing.
yeah.
And
This
and
is
I think,
my biggest top tip. I think uh, it is like, well, networking in general, of course, but I guess going into the specialist side of things for me, going to conferences, or yeah, these, maybe have a local meetup thing. Now it's super easy, with this Clubhouse, YouTube thing. I mean, there's loads of people in the audience that, Kiko's there. I've never met her, but we've now connected and talked. There's a bunch of people. I think Will is in the audience. We're also in touch quite often, and it's really easy to have that connection. But for me, I think one of the most pivotal things I did in my career was in 2014 or 15. I went smart. What was it called? Yeah, Smart Geometry was in Hong Kong for the first time ever. Smart Geometry, for those of you who don't know, is a conference that's very, computation technology driven. It's a great week long conference. There's a workshop and then a 2 day conference, and it was and I was really interested in this kind of stuff, and wanted to make that transition from a designer. And I tried to get my company, which was IDIS at the time, to me to go, because it's not out the realms of possibility that they pay, but they wouldn't pay, so I paid myself and I took the time off as annual leave, and I went, and the connections I made there, my job, my front, it wasn't like straight after the event. It was also connections that then got me to big as well. So it, ended up this person knew this person and introduced me to someone else. And I've also made a ton of connections to other people in the world of BIM and computations, and it all stemmed from that one conference. Is ridiculous. So that was massive, and I can't stress enough these like conferences. I think when they come back in person as well, it is a big game changer for in person. But
Exactly.
especially as going side of things, it's not a big world. It's I know who the BIM manager is at other firms, and we often talk between each other and stuff like that. It is a quite small group niche within the architecture world, which is already it's not massive. Um, so yeah, that's definitely my biggest. Maybe that's a bit more specialist, you but yeah, that was a huge one for me.
Well, it's always worth thinking about, and you're right. If
Yeah,
you want to specialize in something and you getting involved in that with that community, then it's going to help you out. Because if you think about it, that the CV and portfolio and the covering letter and everything we talked about is to give an employer a picture of who you are when they don't know who you are, and if you're going to fill that need in their business. Now, you're right. If it's generic architecture, it's very, very hard to do that. Um, and so it always makes sense for you to have a strong CV and portfolio. But say now you specialize in heritage in architecture and you go to all these heritage events, you can kind of get known for that in that sector. So there are still ways to go about it. And I just think it's a really good thing to practice in your life. And actually, the more and more vocal you are online, the more and more you share, I think that opportunities start coming to you. And don't worry about sometimes messing things up and not being perfect. It's kind of an iterative process. And what I've learned is that I sometimes I look at some of the stuff that I've done on the architecture social, or it goes even the same with like my old CVs. Have we all done that with a project? We look back and you all kind of cringe, like, oh, it's a bit out of date or whatever, or I can't believe I did that. But people forget these things, and it's all about moving on. That CV evolves, that portfolio evolves, and the current version that you're hearing of my thoughts is like me today, whereas a year ago, you're still kind of seeing the same things, but I've evolved my opinion based upon everything that's happened in the last year. So what do I mean by this? You can re-speak to companies that you've applied to before. That's a big one. People go, I sent a CV a year ago and they didn't hire me, and I don't know, they must hate me. And it's like, no, they probably maybe you didn't fit at the right time, or chances are they've forgotten. So do up the CV and portfolio and send it again. I think a general rule of thumb is in recruitment, legally, they can hold on to CVs and portfolios for 6 months. So, after 6 months, it makes sense to send the company again, like an updated CV or portfolio. And there's nothing wrong with that. You don't want to be the guy that hammers them every day, because that's going to be a little bit frustrating for them. I've been hounded once or twice, and there's a big difference between someone enthusiastically excited to hear from you and being absolutely harassed online. But you can get the nuances. But where am I going with this? To summarize the point, Don't be afraid to change things. Don't be afraid to speak online. Don't be don't be afraid of getting involved. Start practicing on little things. Go into a clubhouse is a good example of like practicing in another room, speaking with people that you don't know. It's a really scary idea at first, but after you do it for a while, it's okay. And another example is like a year or two ago, the idea of live streaming absolutely scared me, and now I'm okay with it. And so you might be thinking, Steve, what the heck does live streaming have to do with your job? Well, live streaming's quite scary because I'm talking live to a bunch of people that could judge me, could ridicule me, could misinterpret what I said, but they can also be find maybe where I say stimulating or whatever. So it's kind of me challenging myself through a medium. So what am I saying is that if you're slightly uncomfortable with something, then that's what you've got to build upon. So try and speak in these groups. And the other thing is when you're applying to jobs, don't be afraid a week later to give them a call. Hey, just calling up to see if you've got my application or if there's anything else you need. I mean, that's quite good. And they might go, oh, do you know what? I'm busy, but which one are you? Oh, what's your name? Oh, it's Faisal. Oh, okay, here you are. Oh, it looks good. So, well, I was going to review them this evening, but while you're here, okay, well, I'll see you tomorrow. Boom, done. You spoke and you've done something that you felt uncomfortable with, and it could have gone. It couldn't have gone any better. Or what's the worst thing that happens? You call them up and they go, oh, I haven't got back to it. We'll get back to you. I'm not going to shout at you over the phone, but we always fear the worst things. We fear the worst things. Oh my God, what if I ring up the company? They're going to reject me. Well, guess what? If you haven't got an interview, you haven't got the job yet. You can't lose what you never got. So ring them up. What am I saying with a live stream? The idea of talking online scares you. Then try doing a live stream, try doing a clubhouse, but all this stuff will help you finding your job and that job interview process a lot easier.
Yeah, I think I'd add to that whilst you could be the greatest applicant ever, you've got the best portfolio and stuff. A part of it is timing, a little bit of luck, and there's a bunch of different factors that always come into hiring. And just because you didn't get the job this time does not mean um, you're not applicable in the future. I applied to Big a bunch of times before I got in. Same as some other firms that I ended up working for. So yeah, it's always, if you don't get in this time, don't take it personally. Just make yourself better, and eventually you'll be so good they can refuse. Like we went through a bit of a hiring period in the um, great in the future, but we only had a few spots available, and so there's always a bunch of different factors coming into that. Maybe we'll just because this is the Archi-Tech. I got two more points I think we'll touch on. One is, are you as a recruiter, are you getting what do employers ask from applicants in terms of software and that kind of stuff? Are you seeing a recent trend in things? Because I definitely see it on my side. I'm just curious what you're seeing.
Yeah, I think but it was when I started in recruitment, Ollie. You laugh because I'm getting old, and it was 2014, and that was just about the time when Revit was coming into the UK. So if anyone had Revit like in 2014, it was absolutely gold dust. It's like, Revit? Oh my gosh, you could get a job everywhere. But now it's a little bit more commonplace, especially on grads, and I think that. I actually listened to one of your videos, and I thought it articulated it perfectly. So I want to reiterate it from an employment and recruitment sense. It's like you don't need to know all versions of BIM. So, for instance, at Accurate Lowry, they use ArchiCAD, but if you use Revit, that's great because it understands that BIM, and you can pick it up after a little bit. They won't turn down your application because you don't use ArchiCAD. In fact, not many people use ArchiCAD, or vice versa. I think employers are coming around to the fact that actually, if you know ArchiCAD, it means that you can still have a good understanding of BIM. And so I think people are loosening up. I mean, you'll still get the odd practice somewhere, which is like a tick box. And they're like, oh, you haven't got this, and we're going to ignore your CV. But that's very, very rare. And I would just say that as a graduate, think about, the business cases for it. So the reality is that most employers do, especially larger companies, do want to have people that understand Revit or BIM. So let me rephrase because I'm tripping up over myself. You need to understand BIM. Most companies in the UK, and it could change in your area, but most companies in the UK use Revit. That's kind of like the crux. That's the main thing. The era of CADs, in my opinion, on medium to large places has moved on. The only places that really still use CAD, in my opinion, are like companies which and do like high-end residential or interiors. I've often see people, candidates, which are clinging on to CAD and don't want to learn Revit. And before I would try to tell them all the pluses and why you should do it. And now I just think, you know what? If you want to get forgotten, just get forgotten. I'm not going to try and convince you anymore. But that's really needed. You need to know BIM.
Yeah. I think, obviously, we're probably a little bit biased and preaching to the choir here, but even from my perspective, if you're a designer but you've also got that BIM side, it is a big plus. I would say BIM is the kind of formal skill that I see people wanting a lot. Like you said, in the UK, it's very BIM friendly, and read a standard thing that you should have at this point. But I'd also would put in I as much, but I think computation is that is maybe behind the scenes. Maybe it's a little bit
Yeah.
behind the curve compared to it's not all firms use it because I think we are not doing crazy architecture, therefore, why would I be interested in computation? But like from an internal perspective of the office, like it's no coincidence that some of the go-to designers in big are also have a great computational skill set. It's not
Yeah.
always the case, but I would say um, it's a very common thing. Like a lot of the go-to, he or she, or they are great, and they're great designers, and they're also great at computation. And you know what? They picked up BIM in like a couple of weeks. So I think it's partly. I think BIM and comp valuable, and I think computation is a little bit underrated. I think more firms should be
I
having
agree.
that as part of a design profile. But that being said, I would always trump being if a candidate shows that they're interested and really keen to learn, that goes a long way for me personally. Like each this person, Grasshopper or Revit or Rhino or whatever the thing is. I'm pretty sure I could teach this person pretty quickly because I can see they're quite passionate about it. Yes, they haven't had the skill, they don't have the skill yet, or at university they just didn't have that professor or teach them. But I can see they're really interested. That still goes a long way for me.
Yeah. Do you know what's interesting? I want to get your thoughts on this, Ollie, because I always am amazed where I understand if you've not had, because sometimes with BIM it could be the chicken and egg, as in sometimes if for instance a senior architect, right, has done all his career and then hasn't really worked on BIM projects, I can see why there's a bit of hesitancy to move over, or they need that project. But what I find interesting is sometimes people are just not willing to learn unless like they're given the opportunity in practice. fed to them on a spoon. It doesn't work like that in real life. So to reiterate your point, I think like if someone's really hungry for the opportunity, the fact that you can do little bits and bobs online, and I think it's much better if a candidate says, "Look, I haven't done any BIM in industry, but look, I've done these short courses, and I'm interested, and I've kind of played around with it, and I'm ready to go, and I've been learning this and that," and I think that's a much better attitude than, "Nope, never been on it, and I guess if you hire me, I'll suppose I'll do it." And so you really want to, as you say, you want to tell the employer that you're keen to do it and show you have interest in this. So there's no excuse anymore with like all the opportunities online to not to learn something. And a really quick trick, for example, and is LinkedIn, right? If you had sign up to a premium trial on their, they will throw at you a month for free. Okay, because LinkedIn is just absolutely doing it, and you can get a month, and you can learn any course that you want in that month. So just before you job searching or whatever, sign up to that LinkedIn, which is going to help you with your job search, and then you can rinse one or two tutorials on there, a refresher. And I think, I mean, Skillshare, I know it's the really popular thing on YouTube where people are pumping Skillshares, but I mean, I don't, and Ollie, you're more of an authority on this than me because you're in the digital space, but I do think that the quality and the courses can vary from there. But there's also like so many good people on YouTube who share stuff. I mean, I don't know if anyone knows, but Gavin Crump is like amazing and does all this like free Revit stuff online, and you can just look at all the stuff he's done over the years, and you can you can learn so much stuff. So there's no excuse not to start, and you can just get going. And then when you get the job, you can build upon it. But if you're just there stubbornly saying, "Oh, someone's got to hire me before I learn the software," well, that isn't really an attractive proposition to a future employer, right?
Yeah, yeah. And I also do emphasize that like this, like a Revit masterclass and Grasshopper masterclass, which I'll talk about later on. Um, there is unfortunately a bit of a gap between university and practice, and I think you do pay all this money to go to university, and you're not necessarily taught all the skills, and that's I also appreciate you're not going to be taught everything, but I do appreciate there is still space to learn in practice and stuff like that. But yeah, I think, like you say, there's lots of good places to learn. We will be releasing our own courses very soon, and part of the
Ooh,
reason why we're doing courses, and the goal was always to get to courses, is because we did feel there was a bit of a gap between, you know, getting taught from people.
nice.
Like, there is a big difference between, academically using a piece of software and actually using it in practice. Um, we'll maybe, since Faisal and I will give you a little bit of a preview that we're going to be doing a Grasshopper 101 masterclass at the end of March. We're still working out dates, but I think you can pencil in the 19th and 20th of March. And we're going to be doing it a live 3 day. So it's going to be Saturday, Sunday afternoon, and then we'll do another Saturday the weekend after, um, to go through from opening Grasshopper for the first time to creating a full project. And it's going to be completely free on YouTube. I think we're going to use YouTube and just live stream it, and then the recording will be on our website, which you can access. And so yeah, just as a little tidbit, we're moving into the course
Great.
world, so that's going to be coming. But yeah, I think there's always that space for upskilling in these kind of platforms.
Well, that's perfect. I think that's good that you're doing the course because it's always about, in my opinion, seeing who is like you're a hiring manager, so I'm more interested in learning the course from someone that is actually going to use basically use those skills in the industry and pass them down. And I think that is a nice bridge in the gap, because making that transition from academia to full-time employment and the skills you need is a massive leap of faith, and it is difficult.
Yeah.
And anything to close it is useful, right?
Yeah, exactly. I think I'll do one more question. If anyone has any questions, maybe raise your hand. I'll try and keep it a bit short. I don't want to keep you for too long. But I think the last thing is, what do you think about I don't know how to describe it, kind of out there applications. So, for example, um, there was this guy that famously applied to Big by making a video on YouTube. He made like a rap, like a big rap. I don't know what the story is of him. I think he did actually they definitely reached out to him. I don't know if he ended up working in Copenhagen or something. There's also stories of like, going to a firm and seeing if you can, personally give your CV to someone. Um, what do you think? Do you think you'd recommend that kind of stuff, or maybe one that's not quite as extreme? Let's say is throwing in there like a video CV. What do you think about that? Like instead of your board, it's a link, and then it takes you to I don't know, like a video, or make a video portfolio, or a little, I don't know, VR snippets or something. Maybe I'm going a bit overboard, but
I
it
I
could be interesting.
Yeah, I personally love the idea of it, and I think. But the problem is, I haven't done this for 8 bloody years in recruitment. I'm cynical, okay, and
Yeah.
what do I mean by that is, I think it's amazing. So the video probably went viral, right? Because someone saw it in the office, and everyone saw it, and then people were talking in Big at the coffee station, going, "Oh my god, have you seen that application?" And it finally got to the person at the top, and they went, "Oh, okay, looks interesting. Let's
It
see
was on
the
Dazine. It
CV."
went on to Dazine. It was a good few years ago
Brilliant,
now. I
right?
think it was, I want to say like 2011, 12, 13, something like that.
Yeah. And it shows that these things can work. I think it's like the 1% though, or the
Yeah,
0.1% where they
true.
work. And what happens everywhere else is the amount of times that I see people spending this time and energy on this beautiful website, and most employers don't even bloody click them, right? So you might, because you're a techie, Ollie.
Mm.
But what happens
Yeah.
is, if it goes into the info at inbox, or it goes, as you said, it needs to be put into the system, and we can't attach
Mm.
a website to the system because it doesn't work. Or what happens is, it says, "Please click the link on the website," and then in a different company they've got some crappy system called like Mimecast or whatever. I don't know if you know it, but you can't
What
click
what
anything that's in
what do you
an
think about
email.
what about old school? You rock up at the place and see how
Yeah.
far, if you can get past reception, or is
Again,
that a bit too?
I'm
I
such
mean,
a Grinch
obviously,
for your podcast.
let's
I'm so
let's
cynical. I'm just like,
let's remove the factor of COVID, but let's say
yeah,
we're living in a
I'm
non-COVID world, so
I'm
you
still
don't have the like get out of here kind of thing.
right. Well, luckily I'm in good company, and I'm happy if people disagree with me, but we're just asking me, right? So I'm, again, super
Yeah.
bloody cynical guy, right? The amount of times I remember once, okay, years ago with another friend, and I had sent and so in the 2009 recession, I got my job hands down by sending 800 applications to every company I could find, and just
Wow.
going 2 minutes yeah, but it was during the recession, and then I got like
Yeah.
5 interviews, and I got 4 rejections. I got one offer, but I went with
Wow.
my friend, and because he was like, "Oh, I'm in central London," I was like, "Mate, we'll meet up," and I went round with him, and he took his CV and portfolio, was beautifully made and all this stuff. And he went into companies, and they must have cost like 50 quid each. The tube traveling around was like £10, and my mate was broke. And then it's like half an hour to an hour to travel to each location. And then he would go in and he'd be like, hiya, I got a CV and portfolio. And the lady at reception was like, yeah, just put it over there in the pile, right? And then,
Really,
yeah, and look, I'm sure some
I think you got.
companies would love it,
Yeah,
and
yeah. I
I've
think if you're
seen,
gonna do it, you gotta do it
yeah,
well. Like in the same way, you'd have to research. Like, hey, I know this person works here. I know kind of what they look like through LinkedIn. Let's
well,
see if
it's like the romantic notion of being an architect, isn't it? And I totally
Or
get it.
here you go. Here you go. What about this? Is it's again talking very UK centric, but
Yeah,
every office has a local pub. So it
much
doesn't take
more
a genius
effective.
to work out
Right.
to work out
You're talking
what's
my
the closest
language
pub
now. You buy someone a
because
pint, they will listen to you for 10
yeah.
minutes,
You,
no matter.
well, also, I guess in London, so many firms are in Clerkenwell. So if you just hang around a couple
Correct.
of pubs there, I guarantee
Yeah.
you'll be sipping beers next to I
Now,
don't know,
now you're
Zaha's over there.
talking.
I think there's
My
a EP Lounge.
pessimisticism's going down, right? Because
So
in,
you're
in
both just hanging around
Clerkenwell,
the pub.
yeah. Well, I used to have all my other architecture mates when I was in architecture. And when one would whinge in the pub, the other guy would
Yeah,
be like, well, why don't you come work in my office? They need
yeah,
someone. And he's like, do you know what? I might just send my bloody CV. He goes, don't worry about that. Send it to me and I'll pass it on to my
yeah.
line manager.
Well, there you go. I mean, maybe that's a UK specific and just hang around the pub.
Yeah. We're borderline alcoholics in the UK.
Yeah,
It's true.
just to advocate, Archi-Tech Network is not advocating for you to spend all your time at a pub to, to get a job in architecture. But
I'm
it's,
advocating with a winky face, but buy a non-alcoholic drink, and obviously only do it if you feel safe. And with
yeah,
the pandemic, but it's a social interaction, like we were talking earlier. It's an
yeah.
extreme example because we're implying alcohol, but then actually, and this is an anecdotal statement. So this is not factual, but I think a lot of architects are pissheads. So go to the pub and you'll be okay.
Maybe that's a new feature Archi-Tech Network can add. We'll tell everyone what the local pubs are for each architecture firm.
Yes,
I
exactly.
already know a couple. So
You see,
there you
there
go.
you go.
It's not hard. I mean, just Google the firm and then find what pubs are closest, and find the most architecturally interesting one, and they'll probably be there.
Exactly. I think there was like a hashtag
That's the
bin
formula.
beers. Do you remember that, Ollie? Bin beers? Everyone would go up for like bin beers once a month, talk rubbish and have beer, and it
Oh,
was just an
really?
excuse to get.
I'm trying to start it in a big bin biz.
There you go.
Thursday bin biz.
It's
There you go.
there you go. You're onto it.
You'll have a problem if you look up the big office in London. There's two pubs equidistant from the office, so you'll have a 50-50 chance of guessing it. There you go. Well, I don't know if anyone has any questions, but I think that might be a fun one to stop off at. But yeah, I mean, in all seriousness, I think it's a great time to be looking. I think it seems like a really hot time. Both in the UK and the US, where I am now and where I just left. Um, and from my perspective, it's great to have that extra skill set of BIM and computation. I think is becoming more and more valuable. I think Bill, we've got a question from Bill. I'm just trying to bring you up here. It's been a while since I've used a normal app. So, what's up, Bill?
Hey,
Good to see
Ollie.
you.
Hey, guys. Yeah, I haven't been around a while. Good to see you all.
You're OG architect.
Yeah, yeah, and yeah, just chiming in on your conversation here today, and I think one key thing is that the topic being not how to land a job, but land your dream job, and I
Yeah,
think in my experience, like back in the day, and even today, like when I want to speak to somebody about possible collaboration, or if I'm fanboying some Starchitect or something like that, it's and but well, first of all, I think you've got to have your brand. Even if you're just out of school or you're still in school and you're about to come out, you got to think about your brand. And like for me, when I was a kid, the first thing I ever did was build houses with playing cards and stacking playing cards. And so now how I was going to present myself in my, so you have like your party of how you're presenting yourself and why people aren't going to forget you, or they're going to notice you out of, 500 other applicants or people.
Yeah.
And it's like graphically finding something about yourself like that, and then it has a story behind it. So if they ask you, like, why do you think you are a good candidate, or why are you in architecture, you've got that quick 5-minute story that kind of separates you from those that were like, well, I was an English major, and I didn't know what I was going to do with it, so I went into architecture, kind of thing. And so I think that's one key thing, is like having who you are, and it comes across in your brand through graphics. So somebody sees it, and we used to call it 15-second art, and it's like so they read that from you, and then that piques their curiosity. And then the second main thing is, for me, when I was in school, I was always the guy that friends would say, "Oh, there's Bill again," and because if I went to see a lecture and I was actually interested in it, I had a question after the lecture. So either if I could ask the question in the lecture, if I couldn't, then I went up and spoke to the architect or speaker, after the
You're always
lecture.
the
And
question guy.
yeah, yeah. And you go to
That's
one or
good.
two of their lectures, and I go to my second Sugar Ruban lecture, and I go ask him a question, and he says, "Oh yeah, I know you." And I was like, "No, you don't." And he was like, "No, no, I've seen your work." And so I guess because of my question at the first one, he actually looked me up, and um, and I was just shocked, and so for me in my career, that's how I got in any door, was just, walking up to them, or I even called in a couple offices one time, asked for the principal, told them who I was, especially if I was calling from, another country, and they'd put me right through to him. And then you're on the phone with the guy, and you got to be able to pitch yourself in 30 seconds or less, and most of the time you're not even presenting yourself as that you're looking for a job. You're presenting yourself about something in architecture, or or how you, the means and methods of architecture. You're just having a quick conversation, getting having an exchange. And so half the time they would say, here's my assistant's email, or here's my contact, shoot me a message. And half the time they invited me in and said, hey, let's just grab a coffee. And I never ever mentioned I was interested in their firm, and then they would offer me a job. And have to, a good portion of that time I wasn't actually looking for any position, and I'd say, oh, I'm actually not available, and they'd say, let me know when you are available. So it really is that kind of, with when you're talking dream job, I think it's not like the whole pitch of you're selling yourself. It's the pitch of communicating your brand and letting them know you're there, and maybe a year later you cross paths again, and they're like, hey, Bill, and so that's the big one for me.
Yeah, I think that goes a long way. Like just showing your face, isn't it? And getting around. Again, it kind of maybe taps into those local events and things like that. But now, online, and especially with Clubhouse, it's you can do that whilst sitting at home in your pajamas. So yeah, I think that's a great one. It kind of touches on, again, like conference events, this kind of stuff. What brings different architects together. They really go a long way from networking now. But yeah, that's a great one. I don't know if anyone has any other questions. Otherwise, I think we'll wrap it up for today. Um, but yeah, thank you so much, Stephen, for giving us an insight into you. And I think it's always a tricky one to do when you're kind of job hunting, especially early stages as a graduate or something like that. Oh, we did just have a hand raised. I think, was it Kiko? I don't know why it's not letting you come up. Raise your hand if you want to come up again. Otherwise, yeah, no, I think it's been it's an interesting time to start looking for jobs. New year, new job, right?
New year, new job. But yeah, no, thanks for having me on. You, it's good. And Bill, I really enjoyed your points there. I thought it was bang on. So thanks for sharing that. Awesome. But yeah, great, Ollie. That's it.
Cool.
That's my little meanderings for an evening, and
And
I'm happy to be here.
yeah, well, first podcast of 2020. So thank you for being that, and for everyone's apologies. We've been a bit on and off with the podcast. I've been relocating from New York to London. We've been spending a bit of time in video world. We're coming up with a free Grasshopper March, so stay tuned for that. You can follow us on Instagram or follow us on YouTube, and you'll see be there back next week because I'm finally moving into my apartment next week. But then after that, we have almost 8 guests lined up, so we'll be on the trot, and we'll be talking in architecture 2 weeks from now. So,
Ooh.
Stephen, thanks for joining us, and hope everyone has a good Sunday.
Thanks, guys.
Guys, speak soon.